PvP in Armored Core is very nuanced. Way more nuanced than I think people realize, and you can tell by the meta. Big missile goes boom, here's a Zimmerman to ruin your day. And speaking of the meta, it's kind of what spawned this glorious beast that we'll be talking about today, my take on a PvP tank. And I don't mean tank treads, I mean literally a tank in the RPG aspect of the term. But before we get into the build itself, I think especially in 3v3s where you have the ability to coordinate with your teammates to pull off some really interesting combinations of builds, whether it is a PvP tank that we'll be talking about today or literally a lightweight sniper whose only purpose is to look for opportunities like that to find a combo and look for opportunities to make bursts for my teammates a little bit easier, or popping off scans, staying on the move. I'm trying to really stick on rooftops or play this build on maps that can support the playstyle. I really feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities when it comes to builds in this game. And speaking about that, the build that we'll be talking about today is what I call the Ox, which is a PvP tank. I really wanted a build that could really be a frontline menace. Deal with all of those shotgun and missile builds that really make it hard for your team to get a footing or really find a combo if you're not running the same builds yourselves. And also provide extra burst opportunities for my team, which we'll kind of get into once we dive into the build itself. But yeah, this build actually ended up turning into a beast, and I'm actually super excited to show you what it looks like. So with all of that out of the way, let's take a look at what the build looks like. So taking a look at the build, taking a look at our overall stats here, we are a beefy boy, sitting at just over 100,000 pounds here. As I mentioned, this is a PvP tank, so we wanted to be quite tanky and have some damage mitigation, which comes at the cost of weight, which I actually don't mind because it fits the theme visually of the build that I wanted. But even with that being said, we still have some pretty respectable movement stats on the build. So we have a 0.85 quick boost reload time, a 0.89 recharge delay, and even some pretty decent supply efficiency. So a pretty balanced build overall. We're sitting at about 1750 stability and 1300 defensive performance with about 12,000 AP. So overall, I really am happy with the stats and where they ended up on the setup here. But we will get into all the individual parts and what I chose for each. But taking a look at our weapon setup here first. The first thing, our main weapon on the build, is going to be the flamethrower. Now, the flamethrower is an incredibly powerful weapon for this type of build. Any kind of support build in the game, the flamethrower is actually incredible. And the reason for it is because of the anomaly effect. So if you are unaware, there's 3 anomaly effects in the game. There is the effects from jammers that prevent you from locking on, the shock effect that provide or just does damage, but the fire anomaly is actually one of the craziest in the game. As you can tell by the text there, it greatly reduces the enemy ACS's stability, which in turn makes them pretty much a glass cannon, regardless of what setup they're running. It pretty much makes any weapon in the game that has a decent amount of impact able to pretty much full stagger off of a single hit, if I'm able to get this debuff on somebody. And on top of that, it does a decent amount of damage, and the actual projectile from the flame itself is actually a pretty large area. So it does provide some or a form of obscurement for the opponent visually, which makes it harder for them to hit you, hit your teammates. So it's just a really nice weapon overall, and I really enjoy it for this build. But taking a look at our left arm unit, we are running the laser lance. Now I've gone through quite a few different weapons overall for the build, but especially for my left arm here, I tried out a couple of different ranged weapons. I tried out the drill, but overall I ended up back on the laser lance. I just feel like this is just a incredible weapon for a less mobile mech such as this. Not only does this apply some of the highest amount of stagger out of all the melee weapons in a single hit because of the charge attack. You can see off of the first hit there, it almost does an entire bar, but it is a two-part attack. So if the enemy opponent has any amount of stagger on them at all, and you're able to catch them with the charge attack of this, they're pretty much staggered. And the other thing, or the main thing about the weapon that I really like, the main thing about it is the mobility. So we are a beefy boy, like I mentioned, and we do have a couple of shields which serve as quite a bit of damage mitigation. But mobility is something that I really value and wanted to make sure I had on this build. And this thing is deceptively fast. So a lot of times you'll see in matches, you'll see in the PvP clips coming up here, is people will kind of see me chilling around just with my regular boost, kind of being a menace with my shield and my flamethrower, and they'll kind of think that they're safe at like a certain distance, but all it takes is a quick little action boost into a charge attack, and you can travel a pretty ridiculous amount of distance with this little setup here. A little dash into an action boost into the laser lance can carry you a really long way, and in a pretty short amount of time as well, and people generally don't expect it. So it's something that I like to use not only for catching people who are at range, but even defensively. So let's say I start to get surrounded, and that's something that you really need to watch out for, because being surrounded is the way that you will essentially die, and people will be able to circumvent the fact that you are tanky. Because if somebody gets behind you with like a Zimmerman or a needle, your shield that only blocks the front won't be able to absorb that, right? And you'll end up just getting stunned. So the ability to, if I notice I'm getting surrounded, just really quickly able to quick boost and make space for myself and get myself out of that situation is the really powerful thing about this melee weapon, and the reason why I like it so much. But yeah, that is what I'm running for my left arm units. As far as the back units here, we are running a double shield setup here. Well, I guess if you count our expansion, we're running triple shields. But yeah, like I mentioned, it is a tank, so I wanted to have as much damage mitigation as I could get, and the shields are going to be the way to that. Now, the shields are a little bit tricky. They definitely take some practice and getting used to if you haven't used them at all in the game yet. There's 3 different types of shields as far as their effects are concerned. There are ones that have a little bit better sustained damage over time, so you can generally hold the shield up for a longer amount of time. There are shields that have a less of an ability to hold the shield out and absorb damage for a sustained amount of time, but the trade-off is you have a lot more initial guard damage mitigation. And what the initial guard is, you see that little circle as soon as he activates the shield. There's a window of time which the duration is going to be based on which shield you choose. They all have different durations of their initial guard, but if you can get good with using the initial guard shields, you can pretty much cancel out the damage of things like needles or missiles if you can see it coming and time your shield correctly. But the thing that I don't like about these shields is, as you can see by the heat bar, this shield, for example, costs literally half of the bar to activate. So that means in the middle of a hectic combat situation in a 3v3 where everybody's blasting off missiles, I'm only going to really end up getting 2, maybe 3 uses out of this, and then my shield is out of commission, right? So the reason why I didn't go for the shields that have a higher initial guard mitigation is because of that fact alone, right? I really wanted to have the shield out blocking damage for as long as possible. which is why I've gone for the VP61 here, which is probably my favorite shield out of all. Now, the only other shield that I would maybe consider is going to be the VE61, the Scutum here. This is a really beefy shield. It functions similarly to the one that I'm using, where it has it's more focused on sustained damage mitigation versus your initial guard mitigation. But the way that this one works is you have to have the shield out for a certain amount of time before that you get the full mitigation. And if I quick boost, if I action boost, or do anything that cancels that, I now have to wait again to get that shield back to full strength. So I just didn't like the way that this shield kind of forced you to play. Even though it has a lot better mitigation, it does end up getting you killed a lot more often. And then on top of that as well, even though the shield that we're using doesn't or isn't focused on initial guard damage mitigation, it still does have a decent amount of mitigation. And there is a pretty cool little bit of tech with shields if you're unaware. So as you can see, when I activate my shield, as I was mentioning earlier, you can see that circle. That is when my initial guard is active. Only when that circle is there, right? So the really cool thing about shields is, instead of me trying to time when I'm using that or activating my shield to get the most mitigation, you actually reactivate your shield when you quick boost. So as you can see there, whenever I quick boost, the shield reactivates, and you can even tell by my the heat bar. Every time that I quick boost, the bar is going up a little bit because the shield is having to reactivate out of the quick boost. So this is a little bit of tech that you can use with the build. You literally just have the shield out. Obviously, you don't want to just sit with it out and have it the whole time because it will get overheated from attacks. But as long as you are staying on the move and kind of here and there using your quick boost, which is something you should be doing anyways, you will also be having uptime on that initial guard for your shield. Jumping into our other unit though, we are actually using the ranged pulse shield launcher. Now this is actually a really interesting attachment in the game. I haven't really seen a lot of people use it myself, and even when I use it in PvP, people don't really know what it does. And as you can see, it launches like a disc looking thing, which essentially is a ranged shield. That disc is it blocks damage, and the really cool thing about it is it has a magazine of 3, and you can shoot up to 3 of these at a time. And people, honestly, in the middle of fights, when there's explosions going off and people quick boosting and dashing around, they can never really tell in the middle of a fight that that is in front of them. And I cannot tell you how many needles, how many missiles, how many Zimmerman blasts I've just soaked up with this shield. And then the other thing about it as well is, if the enemy does notice that their attacks are getting blocked and they decide to like go through it and boost through the shield to get to me, they end up taking a lot of stagger damage, which I can then combo into a full stun. And the other interesting thing about this as well is, not only does it cover a pretty decent amount of area, but you can literally shoot this wherever you're looking. So let's say we have a Zimmerman in front of us and a dude in the sky, we can literally use those shields and kind of dance around them to essentially extend the range of our shields and give us a bigger area, a bigger safe area, if you will. So yeah, it's really the idea behind the weapon setup. Double shields on the back, running the drill and the flamethrower to apply that debuff for our teammates, and you will see how effective that flamethrower by itself is. But taking a look at the rest of the parts here, looking at our frame, we are running the appetizer for the headpiece here. Now, just in terms of overall defensive performance, there is a better option. The Verril is going to be just bar for bar, literally the better helmet in every category. Gives you better defensive, better stability, better recovery. The scan distance we don't really care about, but yeah, this is just a better helmet overall if you can fit it, and we can fit it on this setup. But aesthetically, I feel like the appetizer just goes with the setup way better. So honestly, the choice is up to you. If you really want to min max and get the most juice out of the build that you can, then I would say run with the Verril. But I feel like fashion is like half of your build, literally half of your build. You gotta look good and you end up playing good. So it's the reason why I ended up going with the appetizer here. But taking a look at our core, we are running the VE40A. Now this bad boy has, again, defense is the main theme with all the parts that we're trying to choose here. So we have amazing stats across the board. We get really good kinetic, energy, and explosive defense, as well as some AP, and then some stability as well. But the also really important thing about this is the generator output adjustment stat, and we get enough of this to, as you can tell by our EN load and our EN output, pretty much just enough to fit everything into the build. And it goes with the theme aesthetically with the build. So yeah, really good cores. Really not much other options that I would run with this setup. You can maybe run with the How to make yourself a little bit lighter to get some better stats on your, like, your quick boost and your EN recharge, but because our goal is to be a tank, I don't really think it's worth it, and I would prefer to go for the VE40. But taking a look at the arms, we're gonna go with the VE46s, which is the matching arms to the core here. And similar to the core, we have amazing defensive stats. We have more arm limits than or arms load than we really need, because we aren't really running super heavy weapons, but the defensive stats are going to be the main thing that I wanted from this. Same thing with the recoil control and the firearm spec. The only thing that we're shooting at people is a flamethrower, so I don't really care about those two stats. The melee spec does help a bit with our lance, to give it a little bit more damage, but the defensive stats overall was the thing that I was looking for with that. And then moving on to the legs, we are running the bipedal desserts, which are just amazing looking legs. As soon as I unlocked these, I knew I wanted to make a build with them, and I'm so happy that it ended up being this tank here. But again, the theme going with the rest of our parts here, just great stats across the board defensively. Doesn't give us the most AP, but not a lot of legs do. Honestly, the only other one that's going to give us more is going to be these guys here, but they end up making us quite a bit slow and a lot heavier. So I would much rather prefer the desserts. Now, taking a look at our inner parts here, we're going to take a look at the generator first, and we are running the sand tie, which I believe is just one of the best generators to run, especially for a heavyweight mech, because of that EN capacity and the recharge and the supply recovery. It is a bit of a heavier generator, but we managed to fit it into the rest of the build, and like I mentioned, it doesn't have an amazing EN output, but because of our core, we are able to get our output boosted to 3900 instead of it being 3200, which allows us to fit all of these things onto the build. So yeah, the sand tie, really good generator for the build. The booster that I paired with the sand ties was the NGI 001s here. Really good thrusters for, honestly, a whole variety of builds, but especially heavier mechs. As you can see, the ideal quick boost reload weight there is about 90,000. We are a bit over that, but as long as my quick boost time is under 0.9 seconds, I'm okay with that. But we have some really good stats overall. Like, this is just a, honestly, really good bang for your buck generator. It has really good thrust, which is going to give us some good movement speed when we're idling with the shield. It has upward thrust to allow us to kind of mitigate damage a little bit by getting in the air and catch opponents. The upward consumption isn't the greatest, but we have a lot of quick boost thrust, which is really good. It's going to allow us to dodge really far distances and actually avoid those missiles. It has a decent amount of duration as well. And then even the action boost and the melee attack thrusts are going to be some pretty good values for us as well. In terms of the FCS, as I mentioned, we are running the flamethrower, so it literally doesn't matter whether I run a close range or a long range one. The flamethrower is a flamethrower, so you're gonna end up hitting with it, but you can really run with the Oculus or the Abbott if you really care about getting that close range assist. And then, as I mentioned as well, we are running pulse armor for that third shield. But yeah, that is the build. Beefy boy, we call him the Ox from where I'm from. But yeah, we're gonna take a look at what some of the actual gameplay looks like with this build. And yeah, if you guys have any questions at all, please let me know in the comments. But enjoy the rest of the video.